esteemed and overworked president, Dick Hughes.
Work never killed anybody, did it? Anyways, yeah, we'll all be brief. We have a number of speakers, so we'll be brief. But you know, the Moira River, of course, it runs right through the heart of Belleville, and it's you know, it's almost the heart of our city. And it has a very long history. You know, it began as the Saganaska River in the days when the First Nations people were living here. And then it was called Singleton's River, and then it was called Myers Creek, and finally back in 1792 it became the Moira River. And you're probably saying, why? And I have no idea. Well, actually it was named after Baron Rawdon, Earl of Moira, who was a very successful British soldier, of course, during the Revolutionary War in the U.S., and went on to become governor of a lot of colonies. So the fashion at that time was to name places after British royalty. So the Earl of Moira, it became the Moira River. In the mid-1800s, and this is something that we've never realized these days, in the mid-1800s, this was a working river. It wasn't just, you know, a beautiful place to walk along the trail. In the mid-1800s, up to 100,000 logs per year were floated down that river from Central Hastings. So 100,000 logs a year in the spring, and of course they clogged the whole thing, and the mouth of the bay was filled with logs and sawmills. So this was very much a working river at the time. So it was basically the highway for the business, and Belleville's biggest industry at that time was lumbering. So the river was very important. Now, in the mid-1800s, if I could only find my place, Susanna Moody, in fact, in her book, Life in the Clearings, Susanna Moody wrote about the river and how it was, in the springtime, it was just roaring down, filled with logs and mud and all kinds of things, and certainly chunks of ice. And frequently in the 1800s, they would gather at the mouth of the bay, because the bay was still frozen, and there they would start to pile up, and there would be floods every few years. And those floods, especially across the bay, the Coleman Street area, the lower area, where they built the new courthouse on the floodplain, and even down Lower Front Street. So that was quite common in the 1840s. She described, just a few of her words, "Great blocks of ice I've seen popping up and down in boiling surges, and unwieldy saw logs by the thousand perform their extravagant capers." She said that all of this was very violent to watch the river, and it formed ice jams which carried away the dams and carried away the bridges until it reached the lower bridge in a mountain of ice which overflowed and flooded the town. And that continued in the 1840s. Of course, the largest single flood was in 1936, and when apparently the Four Corners was underwater and up to 7 feet of water in the lower parts. So it's been a great river. It's very pretty. We enjoy it now with our walks along the river, but for many, many years it was a very violent river. And even in my own childhood, which was 10, 15 years ago, I can recall watching the river in the springtime and giant pieces of ice coming down. It was really very exciting to see. So I'll stop there. As I say, this is the 4th plaque to honor our river, and as I say, we're very pleased. As you walk along Front Street now, we now have 3 plaques, and we'll have more in the future. This beautiful new street, beautiful new finish, bright and cheery, and you know, step by step we're improving it all the time. So we're very pleased to be able to bring this plaque to the city today. Thank you.
I'd now like to call upon Bruce Bishop, who's a veteran of the 1936 flood, to share a few memories.
Thank you. Thanks, all you people from the society. It's nice of you to invite me. And also, I brought my whole family. My son's over there, and my daughter-in-law, Jane Simpson, and my little daughter, Ann. Mother couldn't make it. I guess I'd be one of the few living survivors of the big flood. It's 37, except possibly Don Leslie, but he didn't get his boots wet. when the CPR Railway Bridge finally succeeded in stacking up all the annual ice flow, it suddenly became a terrible blow for our family business, which was just across the street from City Hall. Dad and others down there had lived with this and monitored this thing for years, but it never got to be such a shocking crescendo as it was when the ice units piled up and then made a dam and stuck them bottom and top. We had to clear it out in the middle of the night. I was my dad's assistant. I was 10 years old. I was out on the front of the counter, and Dad went to work trying to get people to help. He supplied rubber boots for some, tots of whiskey for almost all those in need. And mother and family and friends all made sandwiches and coffee. And it was a big family effort, and it lasted for some time. Dad spent a lot of his time trying to coax the workers back with another shot of whiskey. And it was a scene I'll just never forget. I just kind of was turning over here. When the water rose in the back of our store, we used to have seed in 150-pound bags, straight up like this, cotton bags. And when they swelled and broke, they'd go off like a rifle. I won't say too much more about the help we got from our friends in the business and the staff. Everybody we knew sent something down to us to help us out, and the line was always the same. Good luck, Charlie. Pay us when you can. Now, those were the days. I have a little bit more to say, but I think I'll just keep that for to tell the kids at home around the fireplace. But at the moment, I'd like to tell you about another plaque that's going to be mounted in honor of my father, Charles Bishop, and the Bishop Seed Company. This will be installed courtesy of the Belleville Parks Board and cash from us by Larry Glover, on a small plot of land on the north side of the river at the upper bridge. That's all I have to say, and thank you very much, boys, for all the effort.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for those words. I'm sure you could keep us going for hours on the tales of the flood. But so next up, I'd like to ask Terry Murphy from the Conservation Authority to come up. Terry's going to explain how these floods will never happen ever again.
Well, the one thing I've learned never to say is never again. Especially after last year when we had a drought and the Moira was pretty well dry for 8 months. And this year it's Christine's our water resources manager here, and I believe right now it's 3 times normal height for this time of the year. We're not worried about a flood. But so since the major floods back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and some in the 60s, and there were 2 causes for the flooding, 2 types of ice. One is sheet ice, and those were the big blocks of ice that were talked about. The other that we didn't know a whole lot about back then was called frazzle ice. Frazzle ice is a very fine, slushy ice that sticks to everything. It sticks to the bottom of the river, it sticks to the surface of the ice above it, and eventually it blocks the whole river up. That frazzle ice is formed when you have rapids. When you get rapids and temperatures below -18, the water sprays up into the air and freezes instantly and becomes frazzle ice. So when the consultants and the board members all got together from the Conservation Authority and said, what can we do to prevent flooding? They did studies. Their conclusion was we have to control the ice. We can't control water, but we can control the ice. So the dams that you now see in the city of Belleville, starting at north of the 401, the Holgate Dam behind Holgate Tires, the Wishart Dam, the Lot Dam, the Mulhall Dam, they were all built to control ice. They have very little to do with controlling water. We can't hold the water back, we can't make it go any faster. But those dams do control the ice. So by building those dams, they basically flooded all the rapids out. And when you get rid of the rapids, you get rid of the fragile ice. You get rid of the fragile ice, you definitely have eliminated most of the cause of the flooding in downtown Belleville. Because once the fragile ice blocks the river, and you've also got some sheet ice coming down, there's no place to go but up and over and downtown and Coleman Street, all those places. So when you look behind our dams, you'll see those, right now they're all aluminum. They used to be logs, now they're aluminum logs. The booms that go up behind the dam, they serve a couple functions. One is safety for anybody coming down the river, obviously. The other is, when you do get a sheet of ice coming down, it goes up in the air, rolls over those booms, and breaks off. So instead of having monstrous sheets of ice coming down the river, now you've got small blocks of ice that are easier to get through the system and get away. So if people tell you that we're causing flooding because the dams are holding the water back, we can't hold water back. The water has to keep coming down the river and into the Bay of Quinte. The dams are ice control dams, that's why they were built. The other thing the Conservation Authority did since the original floods were floodplain mapping. We have floodplain mapping along the river, right from the bay all the way north to Tweed, that tells us where the natural river will flood during a major storm event, like a 1 in 100 year storm. And that's a prediction of the worst possible storm you could get in 100 years. We've already passed that, so those things don't mean a whole lot anymore. But those are the maps that we use now to prevent people from building there. Not a popular thing, but there's a good reason for it. It costs a lot of money to protect people who are now living in the floodplain. So this occasion, commemorating the old floods from the 30s, certainly is a special event for us at the Conservation Authority because it's a reminder of why all this work was done, and it has worked. So I just want to thank the Historic Society and everybody else involved in this. And I'm never going to say never, but I do hope we never have a major flood down here again.
Well, thank you, Terry. I'm reassured that we won't have any reoccurrences of these events. Next up, I'd like to call upon Edgerton Boyce to say a few words.
Thanks, Terry, and I know we won't have to pay our levy if we get another flood, according to you, which is great. I'm here with Councillor Thompson today to bring greetings on behalf of my colleagues on City Council. Excuse me if I use this book, Belleville. I've taken a couple quotes, and the author's assured me that he won't sue me for plagiarism. Thank you.
It's available for sale, too.
Yeah, and it is for sale, $50. Thank you. Today's plaque addresses the many floods that have occurred since the 1800s. As we've heard, the river roars and rages like a chafed lion and frets and foams against its rocky barrier, as if determined to overcome every obstacle that dares to impede its furious course. We certainly recognize that, as noted Canadian author Susanna Moody, who devoted almost 8 pages to Belleville floods in her 1853 book, Life in the Clearings. The earliest recorded mention of flooding occurred in the field notes of surveyor Samuel Wilmot, who on March 26, 1816, while preparing the original survey for Belleville at the mouth of the river, that the river had overflowed